March 11th, 2011 remains one of the most devastating dates in recent Japanese history, and for good reason. That day, a 9.1 magnitude undersea earthquake occurred off the northeastern coast of Honshu. It was the largest earthquake ever recorded in the country, but that alone was not what made that day a tragedy. The earthquake triggered a devastating tsunami that tore through northeastern Japan, particularly the coastal towns of the Tohoku region. The tsunami's waves erupted from the epicenter at speeds approaching 500 miles per hour. In the city of Sendai, the waves reached heights of up to 33 feet before slamming into the city and penetrating roughly 6 miles inland. Similar catastrophes played out in Iwate, Ibaraki, Chiba, and perhaps most infamously, Fukushima. The earthquake and tsunami alone claimed the lives of more than 19,000 people, but they also caused one of history's most devastating nuclear disasters. The earthquake prompted multiple nuclear power plants near the epicenter to shut down, but when the tsunami waves barreled into Fukushima, they caused significant damage to backup generators at the Fukushima Daiichi plant. With the power cut, the cooling systems in 3 reactors failed, causing their cores to overheat and the radioactive fuel rods to partially melt down. Days after the havoc of the tsunami, the facilities housing reactors 1 and 3 exploded, prompting the Japanese government to evacuate anyone living within a roughly 12.5-mile radius, displacing more than 160,000 people, and establish an 18-mile no-fly zone around the facility. The initial extent of the damage was unknown, but over the following months, it became apparent how catastrophic it had truly been. Radiation levels in some local food and water supplies increased, leading Japanese officials to issue warnings about their consumption. Nearby seawater was contaminated with high levels of radioactive iodine-131, and just a few weeks after the initial explosions, nuclear regulators elevated the severity level of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear emergency from 5 to 7, the highest level on the International Atomic Energy Agency's scale. That meant the Fukushima nuclear incident was now on the same scale as Chernobyl. But Fukushima and the Chernobyl nuclear disaster that rocked the Soviet Union in 1986 were not isolated incidents. There have been a number of horrific nuclear disasters in modern history, each one serving as yet another dire warning about the cataclysmic possibilities that can accompany nuclear power. At the same time, through it all, many have sung the praises of nuclear energy, arguing that the benefits greatly outweigh the risks. Whichever side of the argument you happen to land on, it's undeniable that nuclear power can be a mighty force, one that sometimes brings calamity. You're listening to History Uncovered, brought to you by the digital publisher All That's Interesting, where we explore the uncharted corners of the natural world and the world past. I'm All That's Interesting staff writer Austin Harvey.
And I'm All That's Interesting staff writer Kalina Fraga.
And today we are discussing the most devastating nuclear disasters in history.
Yeah, you, I think, updated an article on the Halifax explosion, and I edited it.
Yeah.
And that was like the biggest explosion in the pre-nuclear age, and it was pretty devastating.
I think the thing with these nuclear ones is like the fallout ends up being a lot worse than maybe the immediate incident.
Yeah.
Not in every case, but like the fallout lasts a lot longer. The Halifax explosion was just
power.
An instant, quick TLDR on that. What was it? In Nova Scotia, Canada during World War I.
Yeah.
If I'm remembering this right. These two boats collided, but one of them was just like loaded up with tons and tons of explosives and
en route to Europe.
Materials to make explosives on their way to Europe. And the crew abandoned ship and swam to shore and started running for the hills. And all of a sudden it blew up. And I mean, it like leveled the town and thousands of people.
It's pretty crazy photos. Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of fallout, this is another, I don't think this article is published yet, although maybe it will be by the time this comes out, is one I wrote recently about the Lucky Dragon ship, which was this ship of a Japanese fisherman who got caught in the fallout of the Castle Bravo test. And it's an interesting story because they came back to Japan and it was this whole international incident. But there was a guy working on a screenplay about monsters at the time. And when he heard about this, he was like, oh, I'll include that in my story, which became Godzilla.
I was about to add, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Very interesting origins for Godzilla.
Right. But people didn't really know what fallout was then because they assumed that the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were just like bombs, just like wipe people out. Fallout they didn't really understand what it was yet.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that there would be any. Right. Why would you?
Uh-huh.
Because before that, there hadn't been.
It was something
Things just
something
blew
new.
up and then it was done.
Mm-hmm.
As we'll see. That is obviously not the case with nuclear disasters here. I'll start with what is... I ranked these in order of severity. The top two are rated the same on the scale. This one is the more recent of the two, and it's also the one I talked about in the intro.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll start with that, but this is the 2011 Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster, which we've mentioned before on our episode about the 2004 tsunami.
Oh, yeah.
Because this incident, this was in March 11th, 2001, a magnitude 9 earthquake occurred off the coast of Honshu. That then caused tsunamis to barrel into the Japanese coast. And they were coming in at 500 miles per hour. When they struck at Sendai, they were 33 feet tall. So the size of a building.
Wow.
Which I think was very similar sort of height to the ones that were crashing in 2004.
Yeah.
And so that alone was devastating. I mean, even just from the tsunami alone, 19,000 people died. Entire coastal villages were swept away. You and I recently worked on a post about the wind phone, which was created in the wake of this. So, well, sort of
popularized, maybe.
Yeah, it was kind of happening before. It was December 2010. This guy kind of repurposed an old telephone booth as a way of not necessarily communicating with the dead in a paranormal sense, but in the sense of getting closure.
Mm-hmm. Last words and
last words, things you wish you could have said, things like that. And he set it up in his back garden. And then in the wake of these tsunamis and this earthquake, he allowed people just from elsewhere to come and sort of do the same thing. And now since then, they've popped up
everywhere,
all over the world. But yeah, I mean, everywhere across Europe. There's some in the United States. It's a very interesting story. It's very, very sad.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting emotional just writing some of the accounts of what people said. And I was like, God,
yeah,
geez.
I know.
But it's also, it's a beautiful story too, because it's just this one person who came up with it. But it sort of contextualizes just how devastating this tsunami alone was. And then you compound it with what happened as a result, which was that as this tsunami tore in through northeastern Japan, it cut power to the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Because the plant lost power, that also meant that the cooling systems were turned off. In reactors 1, 2, and 3, that then led them to overheat and their cores partially melted down. So on March 12th, on March 14th, and on March 15th, there were several hydrogen explosions that destroyed parts of the plant. They started to spill radioactive waste into the nearby area and the water. It was initially classified as a level 5 event on the International Nuclear Event Scale. That then got upgraded to a level 7, which is the highest. I think is out of 8, but 7 is the highest that we've really hit. And for context, that is the same as Chernobyl.
Wow. God, I didn't know that they were the same intensity.
Yeah, that's the thing is I don't know if it was the same intensity, but I think it was just because of the amount of materials that got dumped out. I'm not an expert. And so my word doesn't carry much weight here. I would not classify this the same as Chernobyl.
I think in Chernobyl, well, I know that with this one, there was concern about the water.
That was a big thing.
But in Chernobyl, I think there was concern about the air, that this cloud was going to move across.
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about Chernobyl next. But the cloud of nuclear radiation was threatening potentially to go across all of Eastern Europe. So, yeah, there was concern about the water. It seems like it wasn't as big a deal because it's been, 14 years since this happened. And they're already at the point where they're kind of the water's fine. We're putting it back into the ocean. We're using some of the dirt that we've collected from there at various public places now. So they're kind of already being no, this one's fine. For that reason alone, I wouldn't put it in the same level as Chernobyl because Chernobyl is still uninhabitable today, and it's been many, many years.
Right, yeah. They were able to contain this one, it seems like then.
Yeah. I mean, granted, 25-year difference between the two things.
Yeah, technology is different.
Technology got better.
Practices.
Protocol, yeah. In the aftermath of this one, no one died immediately, but there were 160,000 people displaced after being told to evacuate, which is a significant number of people.
Mm-hmm.
Today, most of that evacuation order has been lifted, but people are still just like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Fair.
Which is understandable. I mean, it's been over a decade. You've probably settled in somewhere else and you're still concerned about like the nuclear radiation. Why would you go back?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But so much
There's
time
no
has
real
passed.
incentive.
Mm-hmm.
The World Health Organization also has since determined that the general population's exposure to the radiation was relatively low. There were no observable increases in cancer rates outside of like the most contaminated areas. But yeah, as you said, there was concern about like the ocean, about fish that people were getting from the water there. The surrounding agriculture took a major hit from this. But now they're using some of that contaminated and like processed water now, and they're recycling it through the ocean, trying to clean things up. And then, yeah, like I said, they have 14 million cubic meters of contaminated soil from the site, which is a lot of soil. And I don't know like why they gathered it all. I guess maybe just to get it out of the earth or whatever. But they're using some of that in public works, including flower beds outside of the Japanese prime minister's office as like a way of saying that it's showing you how safe it is, I guess. It's a pretty controversial move from what I gathered, which understandable.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of fear about it.
Yeah, well, and especially in Japan, I'm sure there's much more, like, there's paranoia around nuclear contamination everywhere that there's nuclear reactors and nuclear missiles. Japan's kind of got some historical trauma in that department as well that a lot of other places, actually everywhere else, does not have. Because it's the only time that's ever happened. So, fair enough. Other than that, the only other real like major change that came out of this was just, stricter safety protocols, regulatory reforms, things like that. This one, it's like, sure, they implemented new safety standards. I don't even think it's really their fault in this case.
Well, it's sort of like if you're in an earthquake prone country like Japan, there should probably be some backup stuff for a nuclear power plant or reactor or whatever.
The earthquake was really less the problem, though. It was more the giant wall of water that came.
Yeah,
which, hey,
but that's
fair
like
enough.
not
You're surrounded by the
unprecedented.
ocean.
Yeah, right. So it seems like that could have been in place beforehand.
Yeah. It was a historically terrible earthquake and tsunami, too.
Yeah.
Like, I think it was like at the very least the worst in modern Japanese history. There was another late 1800s. 1850-ish, around there. There was another really devastating earthquake, but I can't remember if it was worse than the 2011 one or not.
I feel like you should build things like this with like the worst possible, like beyond the worst in mind, like so it could withstand,
Definitely not on the coast.
Right. Yeah. I sort of remember this one because I think there was like chatter in Seattle about water from contaminated water getting to Seattle or contaminated like objects.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, but it seems like this one, like it was also sort of like a warning, like it could have been like much, much worse, and they were able to kind of rein it in.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully the nuclear part of this didn't get worse because, I mean, like, again, the country was already pretty devastated, and then if you factor in like pretty big nuclear incident as well.
Yeah.
So 160,000 people displaced, not great, better than 160,000 people dead.
Exactly.
To put a silver lining twist on it. But yeah, the next one, it felt like the natural place to go with this, Chernobyl. There's so much information out there about Chernobyl at this point, and an HBO show.
Yeah, I watched it. I think it came out during the pandemic.
I think so.
During 2020, and I started watching it, but it was like it was too upsetting, and I had to stop. Yeah,
I did not watch it for that reason. I was like, I'm good, but I think it's probably the most infamous nuclear incident in the world. But for a little context, it happened on April 26th, 1986, in Pripyat, Ukraine, which was at the time part of the Soviet Union, and this was during a late night safety test at reactor number 4. Operators at the plant attempted to simulate a power outage to ensure that the reactor could safely shut down until backup generators were operational. But due to a combination of design flaws in the RBMK reactor and operator errors, the test went very awry. the reactor became unstable, and it led to a massive explosion and a fire that released large quantities of radioactive materials into the atmosphere, and 2 plant workers died right then and there. And then over the following few weeks, 28 other emergency workers and plant staff succumbed to acute radiation sickness. I'm going to assume that's what the show is mostly about, like the cleanup.
I think I watched like the first 3 episodes, and it was like the disaster and then how they tried to cover it up for a while, but how people in town were slowly starting to notice something was wrong. There were like scientists who had, stuff going off the charts in their labs, and no one was answering what was happening.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that I'm sure people listening to this have seen it. I feel like we're the minority of people who have not watched this show.
Yeah.
28 people die in the immediate aftermath. 134 people are then later diagnosed with acute radiation sickness, and they're experiencing symptoms like nausea, vomiting, severe burns. I didn't know just how bad radiation sickness can get, like to the point where like people were losing parts of their skin, like skin just peeling off of like any body parts that were exposed, and
right,
nasty stuff,
yeah.
nasty stuff. Which I guess I did know that, but I guess I assumed that it needed to be much more intense.
Well, they were pretty close to this, it seems.
Right, and unknowingly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess that is a big part of the show Fallout, right? Is that there are these characters who have like no skin.
Oh.
So they're all ghoulish from the exposure.
Yeah.
So never mind. I guess I did kind of know that. It also, in particular, it was this compound that keeps coming up. It's iodine-131. That particularly radioactive substance led to like a huge increase in thyroid cancer cases, especially among children. By 2005, so just under 20 years later, more than 6,000 cases and 15 fatalities were reported.
Wow.
As a result.
I remember watching this documentary about Chernobyl. It was either in high school or one of my college classes, but it was about how children in the area were born at a very high rate of missing a limb or having a deformed limb, and how people like thought that this was probably because of Chernobyl. But for like political reasons, this was like never acknowledged by any government or commission or anything. But it was such a high rate and was so unusual that it seemed like it was probably related.
Yeah, it's not a very common thing, and especially in like a concentrated area.
Right.
Unless that concentrated area happens to be
the site of this disaster.
Radioactive. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there were all kinds of problems that stemmed as a result of this. Like people in the nearby area, and especially cleanup workers, experienced elevated risks of leukemia, cataracts, cardiovascular disease. That all naturally affected their mental health as well. There were, increased rates of depression and anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. And then, as we were talking about a minute ago, that explosion released so much radioactive material into the air that it started spreading across like vast areas of Europe, including like Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine. So it was significantly less isolated.
I think that was part of the show too. It was like cut to like a French like intelligence officer, and he was like, "There seems to be this like cloud moving, and we're not sure what it is, but this seems bad."
Yeah, I mean, it would be a scary thought to be like,
what can you do at that point? Not very much.
What do you do? You can't just like get a big fan and blow it the other way.
Yeah. I think again, my intelligence about nuclear stuff comes from this show. But they were taking like iodine tablets to protect themselves. So I guess that was something you could do. I think it was iodine tablets.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Also fun fact.
If it's a radioactive version of iodine, that's...
Well, that's why, yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was an iodine tablet. That just sounds right to me. But
makes sense.
Yeah. In New York, if you walk around, there's all these, you'll see it on the sides of buildings, fallout shelter. And I don't know that those are like maintained, but they're everywhere. So I guess we're well prepared in case of a nuclear disaster here.
Well, yeah. I wonder, that's a Cold War carryover for sure.
Probably, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like if a bomb were to hit anywhere, it'd probably be like New York.
Right. DC.
New York, Seattle, LA, Chicago. Probably would be DC, Washington, DC.
Mm-hmm.
Probably rife with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, for greater context here, I mean, this spread so far and wide that there were like, we said 160,000 people displaced during Fukushima Daiichi. 5 million people lived in contaminated zones after that, as a result of Chernobyl. And that is like, I mean, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, that's hard to comprehend.
Yeah, and the environmental damage was like significant as well. There was a forest nearby. It's now called the Red Forest. It wasn't red before. Turned a reddish brown hue and then just later died.
Wow, that's so scary.
Yeah, I mean, it just completely wrecked everything around it. There have been more recent updates, and I think we've even covered it on the site. But nature is sort of starting to now retake the region. The exclusion zone has at one point in time, the exclusion zone was just like dead land with nothing living in it. Now there's more wildlife, animals like wolves and elk and lynx. Lynxes?
I think lots of dogs too. People left behind their pet dogs and they've become
just kind of
wild in Chernobyl.
Anti-domesticated, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're still, if people are there, I don't think they would like attack them or anything, but they just have their own kind of dog colony now. And yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like a great setup for a movie.
Yeah, it does. I interviewed at a company that I won't name a while ago, and part of their thing was like tours to places like Chernobyl. And one of the questions they asked was like, how comfortable are you? Like, if the law is to not break into a place, how would you feel about that? And I was like,
probably not great.
I think I wouldn't break into the place. I didn't get the job, so
well, you weren't willing to go the extra mile.
Yeah.
I know nuclear tourism is a pretty popular industry.
Is it?
Yeah, it seems strange to me, but there are people who will like go into very radioactive areas to like on like buses and in hazmat suits to kind of it was a really great show. Netflix's I think it was called Dark Tourism with Louis Theroux.
Oh.
I want to make sure that was Louis Theroux.
Well, I keep hearing his name all the time, and I get him confused with Justin Theroux, but I assume they're not Justin.
No. I believe Louis Theroux was the guy who did the movie about Scientology called like My Scientology Movie.
I don't know it.
And it's a phenomenal documentary. He gets like stalked by Scientologists, and it's very strange. Okay, I was wrong. That is Louis Theroux, who does the My Scientology movie. The journalist who did the Dark Tourism show was David Farrier. And he traveled to all these kinds of like, each episode was divided up so that he was like in a certain country. So there was like Latin America, Japan, United States. And it wasn't all nuclear stuff. It was like in Latin America, he went to narco and things like that. But when he went to Japan, he did some nuclear tourism.
I think we might have maybe not brought him up specifically, but when we were doing the Jack Ripper series, there's a lot of like Jack Ripper tours. We kind of talked about like dark tourism adjacent stuff that maybe he was involved in that too. I don't know, but
yeah. I mean, it's definitely up the same alley. It's like sort of investigating morbid history in places. Which, one thing to go on a Jack the Ripper tour, another to like expose yourself to radioactive environments.
I think Chernobyl you can go and it's not dangerous in parts. Yeah. In parts, I'm not saying,
Right. But I mean, they've been working for 40 years to clean up and contain the area. But at the time of this recording, it's still like decades away from being fully cleaned up.
It's kind of amazing how long nuclear like waste could last. It's I want to say thousands. There's some crazy number. I
guess that's why we use it for energy, right? Is because it's sort of just like infinitely renewable. Dangerous, but I don't know, maybe, worth the risk.
Yeah.
Compared to burning gasoline all the time. Maybe not. I don't
know.
I mean,
you can
if
keep
it goes wrong,
contained.
It can go really, really wrong.
Yeah.
So, but this is why I say I don't think the Fukushima Daiichi one should be quite on the same level, because it's like with Chernobyl, there was a very, very real, long-term, multi-decade sort of like fallout cleanup situation and a lot of people dying in the immediate aftermath. It feels like with the Fukushima Daiichi one, they were like concerned that it could be Chernobyl level.
Right.
So they upped the level on the INES scale. but then like never brought it back down. I feel like 5 or 6 was probably the right call initially.
Yeah, maybe just like something like that hadn't happened in a very long time, and it's a reminder that it could happen.
Yeah, true. Maybe just like rank it higher so that it's like, hey, guys, it's pretty bad.
Don't forget, it's still dangerous.
We got another one coming out of the Soviet Union, which probably not that surprising. Sorry to all the Soviets out there. But this one is significantly less well known than Chernobyl. This is the Kishtim disaster. It happened on September 28th, 1957 at the Mayak Production Association in the Soviet Union. Lots of things went wrong here. Prior to the actual incident, a cooling system in a storage tank had failed. So this is like a common trope, I guess, of nuclear incidents. This tank in particular contained 70 to 80 tons of high-level liquid radioactive waste. The temperature rose to around 660 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh my God.
Which, like, it on the surface does not sound that hot.
It sounds pretty hot.
I guess I'm thinking like, oh, your oven goes up to 450. What's 200 degrees more? A lot, a lot more. So it's how it turns out. I wanted it to be a bigger number for the sake of drama. I wanted it to be like 5,000 degrees.
Right,
it's like, 660. Concerningly low for how much damage this can cause. I think that's maybe my concern is I want it to be as hot as the sun if it's going to cause a problem. And it's
a lot easier to cause problems than we want it to.
A lot easier to cause problems than we want it to be. Once again, this led to a chemical explosion, like roughly equivalent to around 70 to 100 tons of TNT.
Wow.
Which is massive. The explosion released around 20 million curies of radioactive material into the atmosphere. Fun little way of measuring that based on Marie Curie.
That is fun. If something's going to be fun about this stuff.
If something's going to be fun about it, is that they named the measurement for radioactive waste after Marie Curie. This radioactive clot also spread significantly. This traveled northeast and culminated in an area of around 300 square miles. This included the same sort of like long-lived radioactive isotopes, in this case, high amounts of cesium-137 and strontium-90, which posed very long-term environmental hazards. 10,000 people were evacuated from the most affected areas, but around 270,000 others continue to live in the affected regions without being adequately informed about the risks. You mentioned that like they tried to cover up Chernobyl and kind of failed because
they couldn't. It was just too big.
They couldn't. This one, they did try and succeeded for about 30 years.
Wow.
And in that 30-something year span, people were getting radiation poisoning, other types of illness, cancer rates skyrocketed. 8,000 people died due to the radiation exposure.
Wow.
And the Soviet government maintained that it never happened until 1989. So 3 years after Chernobyl, they were finally like, oh, by the way, yeah, this one also blew up.
Wow. That must have been, they were being a bit more open about things in 1989.
They kind of had to be at that point, I think.
Yeah.
They were on the way out. They were like, they're going to find out anyway.
Yeah.
But, it's 30 years. They just said nothing about it. And this is where, people were like you said, at Chernobyl, they were like, why are all these kids being born without limbs? People here were like, hey, why is my skin peeling off?
Gosh.
I mean, it's like, and Chernobyl, they speculated, right? Here, no one knew why this was happening. I mean, that's an entire, how long is a generation? 15 years? Do we consider that?
Sounds right.
20?
Sure.
15, 20 years. So, I mean, it's like 2 generations of people.
I wonder if European or like American intelligence was like, something's going on in this corner of the world, or if it was effectively kept a secret until 1989.
I don't know. I think it was effectively kept a secret because the funny in the sense of not haha funny, but like not quite ironic, just interesting, I suppose, is that it's called the Kishtim disaster. It didn't even happen in Kishtim. Kishtim was the next nearest town listed on the map, The actual nearest town was called Ozyorsk.
Wow.
But it didn't appear on any official maps at the time.
Wow.
So people were
like,
oh, the Kitchen one, because that's how secret it was. It was like the town wasn't even listed.
Wow.
On official
that's so
maps.
Wild. I feel like there was some like professor of cartography who was like, what happened to this town? It was on my old maps and now it's gone. Suspicious.
Yeah. Like it felt like they like intentionally wiped it from official maps because they put a nuclear plant there.
Wow. Oh, yeah, that makes sense too.
That's me speculating, and don't take that as fact. That is pure speculation on my part.
Huh.
But given the circumstances, that wouldn't surprise me.
Right.
So, but I felt like I was dishing it out to the Europeans and the Japanese a little bit too much here in this episode. So I decided to end here on one a little close to home.
Oh, very close
literally
your
close
home.
to home for me.
Yeah.
But I was like, all right, we beat up on the non-Americans for a little bit, talk about an American one to wrap it up here. But this was the 3 Mile Island nuclear incident. This happened March 28th, 1979, near Harrisburg, PA. I'm Pittsburgh based, so not close enough that I'm concerned, but I have been to Harrisburg several times. These seem to always happen in the middle of the night, too. Around 4 a.m, a mechanical or electrical failure caused the main feed water pumps at the 3 Mile Island Unit 2 reactor to stop. That halted the flow of water to the steam generators. We know where this is going. Temperatures increase. Pressure increases. There was a relief valve that had opened as designed to alleviate the pressure, but then it became stuck open. And operators didn't realize because the instrumentation in the control room was incorrectly showing that the valve was closed again.
Oh, boy.
And so they reduced the flow of cooling water because they were like, oh, the valve's closed. We can, ease up on the water now. And that just exacerbated things. Once again, reactor core overheated, roughly half of it melted. And then a hydrogen bubble started to form inside the reactor vessel. And there was concern that it was going to explode.
If it exploded, would that be like a nuclear explosion then?
It would have been similar to like Chernobyl or...
okay. Yeah, it wouldn't be like a bomb going off. Exactly.
I mean, the plant would explode, but...
Still seems bad. Okay.
Yeah, still bad. Still bad. And it would have exploded. It would have sent a cloud of stuff up into the air, but it wouldn't have been like a mushroom cloud. But it would have been what happened at the last 2 instances.
I see.
Which Harrisburg is like what? Like middle PA. There's a lot of farmland that would have been affected and things like that. It would have not been good. Thankfully, that bubble did not burst. But there were still like 2 million people in the surrounding area who were exposed to small amounts of radiation just from it heating up. I mean, it didn't even explode, and they were still 2 million people exposed. It wasn't like, they said it was like an amount comparable to getting an X-ray. So relatively not damaging. Still really concerning that like this thing didn't even explode. That could happen
at all. Yeah.
And you were still affected by it. So like a few days later, the Pennsylvania governor at the time, Dick Thornburg, he told pregnant women and preschool-aged children within a 5-mile radius to evacuate. Men are fine. Men stay.
Yeah, they won't be affected at all.
Don't worry about it, guys. But as a result, 144,000 people left their homes. And then Jimmy Carter, who I did not know this before researching this, was a trained nuclear engineer.
I knew that for some reason. It was either related to the Navy or not. I don't know, but I did know that fact. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, you're more the presidential history person here, but I did not know that about Jimmy Carter, so that's very interesting. But he then visited the site and was like, it's fine. You can move back into your homes. It's all good. Still a good amount of radiation that was released into the environment that raised some concern. And so there was this 14-year cleanup operation that cost $1 billion.
Wow. That's honestly less than I thought it would be. Things now seem to cost like $2 or $3 billion.
Yeah, but hey, $1 billion for like the 1980s. I mean, jeez.
Yeah.
$1 billion again for like a power plant that didn't even explode. It got too hot, and that's it.
Yeah, this stuff is very, very dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, they just closed it. And they just entombed it in concrete. Just never touched it again.
This seems to be the strategy of dealing with nuclear waste in general.
Just cover it up.
Well, we have some article about a similar thing somewhere in the Marshall Islands. They have like a big coffin or a concrete coffin for nuclear waste that was dumped there from, I think, the US. And, it might be leaking. And with climate change, like stuff's eroding or like water's moving in, and there really is no plan if that
it's not like concrete
breached.
Holds up forever.
It can be broken, and
right.
So that seems like bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other concern with the nuclear stuff, right? Is like, what do you do with it?
No, you can't do anything with it.
There's nothing you can do with it.
Unless you...
Like, I know like carbon fuel is like not great. It's lingering in the environment. Like, there's a lot of, bad stuff happening environmentally by burning coal and gasoline and things like that. And like, it just seems like we have more effective, safe ways of renewable energy. Maybe they're not as powerful. I don't know what really we power with nuclear power.
Well, I think in the past decade, this has become a problem because in Germany, Angela Merkel was like, we're going to be off nuclear power. And then because of the war in Ukraine and everything, and not having other power sources and not having nuclear power anymore, like there's like an energy crisis. The energy bills are really high because they got rid of nuclear power. So now it's like a problem.
Yeah, I'm just like, I mean, it just says, nuclear power is just for like generating electricity, right? So.
Well, but that can be like heat and...
Well, sure. I mean, it's everything.
Yeah.
It's just like fossil fuels, not great. Wind and solar, not reliable enough, right? That's like the primary concern there is just like we don't have enough infrastructure for it. And it's...
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the infrastructure for it because it hasn't been like politically... Yeah.
All the lobbyists rooting for... I'm speaking, broadly here, trying to keep it apolitical as much as I can. I don't think it's not political to say the fossil fuels are not great, right?
I mean, I think it's scientifically proven they're bad for the environment. I think people would argue that, I don't know, it's a resource and an untapped resource in some places.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. But environmentally, atmospherically. But I think for a long time, people viewed nuclear as like the better option because it was like, oh, it's infinitely renewable.
It's clean. It's clean energy.
It's clean energy. We can power a lot of things with a sort of smaller amount of factories and plants. But then there's then the trade-off is like, well, if something goes wrong.
Right. It can go very, very, very wrong. I mean, the number of people in these 4 incidences that were affected were all, I think all in like the tens of thousands, whether it was being forced to evacuate or sick or dead.
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
I mean, even that one in Harrisburg, 144,000 people left their homes. So like this is never a small incident.
Yeah.
And again, that was the worst nuclear disaster or the nuclear power incident in the United States. There were other ones I didn't include. I mean, there are smaller ones that happened here, that happened abroad. I sort of posed the question or brought up like the thinking point in the intro of this episode of like, is nuclear power worth it in the end? And I don't have an answer because I truly do not know how much like nuclear energy we're still using. The World Nuclear Association says that the USA is the world's largest producer of nuclear power, accounting for about 30% of worldwide generation of nuclear electricity. Great. What does that power?
I don't know.
18% of our total electrical output.
Seems fairly low for being the largest nuclear power producer in the world, he said.
Yeah, in the world. 94 operable reactors. That's what I mean, though. I mean, that's not a huge number of reactors for the amount of energy that produces.
Well, it's pretty unpopular to build a nuclear reactor anywhere in the U.S.
I would imagine so. I would imagine so.
Yeah.
Yeah. They, very concentrated on the East Coast as well, according to this map.
That's interesting. So you would think they'd want to build them out in the desert somewhere or something.
Yeah. No. Desert's looking pretty empty of nuclear facilities.
Wow.
Wow, that is crazy. There's like 2 in California, 1 up in Colombia, like a couple in Texas, and then there's like...
In Colombia? You mean...
Colombia, would that be Washington? Is that the northernmost West Coast state?
Yeah.
The map is not labeled state-wise, and I'm bad at geography.
Oh, yeah.
California, whatever's right above California.
Oregon.
Oregon, and then Washington above Oregon. Okay, so up in Washington, there's one. There's that. That's the gap in my knowledge. There's like none in the Midwest.
So interesting.
And then, a couple in PA, a lot down the coast in like the Virginia area. Well, there you go.
I took a class in I took a lot of American history / Cold War classes. And the one I took was about Soviet environmental disasters. And the class was kind of arguing the point that disasters like the ones we talked about were so much worse in the Soviet Union because they were covered up and they were like, you try to conceal them, then obviously stuff keeps happening. Whereas in the U.S., it sounds like they were a bit more transparent about what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, within days of it happening, they were like, get out.
Yeah.
Shows a lot about the Soviet government. Tells you a lot about the Soviet government.
The story about the town being removed from the map and even the name of the incident still being something else is pretty telling. Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. Insane. Yeah.
It's like one of those things. It doesn't happen often. Every day there are multiple nuclear facilities operating and functioning perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
But when something does happen, it's a very big deal. It's sort of like plane crashes.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's objectively a terrifying idea that a nuclear reactor would have a meltdown and like kill or poison tens or hundreds of thousands of people. There also must be this like inherited fear of nuclear attack from just like from the Cold War and like our parents and grandparents' generation, where it was like this could happen at any time. Like if a madman decides to press the button, like New York City's gone,
Right. That Duck and Cover song. You remember that?
I do. With the turtle.
Yeah. So it is. Yeah. I don't know. It is interesting. But like I said, it's like a plane crash. It's like there were no high profile plane crashes in the United States in like 15 years. And then there were like 3 earlier this year. And then I had to get on a plane and I was thinking about that. And I was like, God, this sucks.
Right. Yeah.
But the only reason in my head is because it's so rare that it happens, that when it does, it's a very big deal.
And planes like nuclear power, like it's a scary thing to do. Like you are like in the air.
It's totally out of your control, right?
Yeah,
that's why, like, even though cars are so much more dangerous and there's so many more people who die in car crashes every single day than on planes, you feel a sense of control when you get in a car.
Right.
And I guess like maybe because you're pumping the gasoline, you're like, this is fine. But you're not putting a nuclear rod into the back of your,
Hope
truck,
not.
right?
Yeah.
Hopefully not. Because you wouldn't want to be anywhere near it in the first place. And like, that's terrifying to think about. So.
Yeah. I mean, nuclear power is like, I think since it was invented and introduced, it's like this thing that like, it's like, oh yeah, this could destroy the world.
And it's crazy too when we like, they just used to like slap radon on whatever, like paint, right? Or like, glow
in the dark,
the radium girls, the
Mm-hmm.
radium, that was it, radium, to make things glow in the dark. And there were like women who were in factories painting radium on things all day. And then they all started to suffer these like very severe
Right. They would like, they would
effects.
suck on the paintbrushes to get it.
Right.
And that made it worse because then they were ingesting this horrible substance. And people were like, it's fine. It's not radioactive. It's great.
So, very scary situation. Interesting stories. Interesting just sort of like how they all kind of follow the same flow of events. It's like a couple things went wrong. There was a chain of events that went awry and then it overheats and becomes a very serious issue.
I wonder if these disasters have any relation at all to like Homer Simpson working at a nuclear power plant, like being like an idiot or not.
Oh, I bet.
I wonder.
Probably. I always forget that that's his job.
That's like the only thing I know about the show. I don't watch it, but I know that he works in a nuclear power plant.
I always forget that. I'm sure there's some sort of commentary being made there, like, because he's notoriously a stupid person.
Right. Notoriously,
wow. Yeah. It's sort of like his one trait.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Huh.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's there's the joke of like the 3-eyed fish in the water too in The Simpsons from like being
for the nuclear
mutated.
Yeah.
I haven't watched The Simpsons in a long time. I went through a phase when I was like a kid around the time of the Simpsons movie coming out. I got really into it.
There's a lot of seasons. Hear, so it's a lot to watch.
I had a Duff beer when I went to Universal.
Oh, okay.
They sell
That's
like the
cool.
Simpsons beer. It's fine. It's like a Bud Light or something.
It's like a butterbeer. I think you can also get at Universal.
Yeah, and you're not allowed to spike it.
Oh, you're not? I mean, how? Like with your own supply, or
well, I guess you could. You're not allowed to order it spiked.
Oh.
It seems like a thing as like a Harry Potter adult you'd want to do, right? You're like, hey, can I get a hard butterbeer? They're like, no, we're contractually not allowed to do that.
What if you like say it and like wink at them, and then maybe they'll.
That's it. I didn't try winking.
I think this stuff is sort of fascinating in the same way that natural disasters are darkly fascinating.
Yeah, I think even maybe a little bit more because there's a human error element to it, which is like, it's like, oh, this was preventable.
Yeah.
Other than probably Fukushima Daiichi. Well, I think that one's less so.
It's just like deeply like, it's like a philosophical thing. It's like, of course, we're going to bring about our own destruction. And of course, we made this like technology that can do that. And of course, we're going to like fumble it kind of. Fear, of all these things.
On that note.
Happy Friday.
Hey, happy Friday. Hey, thanks for listening. Happy Wednesday to listeners. If you're
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. I know we'd gotten a request
after multiple.
Yeah. Well, after we did the tsunami episode, I think even maybe when we were requested to do the tsunami episode, it was like, can you talk about the 2004 tsunami or the 2011 one in Japan?
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, we've kind of alluded to it a few times. I mentioned like that anime movie Suzume is all about 3/11, not the band, the date. And so, yeah, so it kind of felt like a natural progression of things. Like, sure, of course we're going to talk about this.
Yeah. Someone else emailed as well, I think, about 3 Mile Island. But yeah, this has been highly requested, and it was interesting. Yes. I learned some stuff.
Yeah, I hope I know. Like I said, there were a lot to choose from. I was like, I'm just going to keep it relatively concise here.
Yeah, do the big ones.
The big ones, and was maybe like a lesser known. It was big, but no one knew about the Kishtim disaster.
Yeah, so that one was the most interesting. So that was one I had never.
I think
heard
that was probably the one that piqued my interest the most as well.
So
yeah, hopefully the listeners got something out of this as well. And if you did, hey, give us a nice rating, recommend us to your friends, check out the website, allthisinteresting.com, where we are constantly publishing new stories every single day about topics just as interesting as this. You can also sign up for our newsletter there at allthat'sinteresting.com/sign up to get those stories pushed directly to your inbox, or become a member at allthat'sinteresting.com/membership, where for just $5 a month, you can get access to our monthly bonus show, which we will be doing next time.
There's too much going on right now.
It's been a busy week.
It has been a very busy week.
Big things coming soon.
Yeah.
Big things coming soon. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about what I flew out to LA for.
I don't know.
I didn't sign anything saying I couldn't, but I'll hold off until it's closer.
When is the thing?
I think not until the fall, if I'm looking at the schedule correctly. I'm going to hold off for now, but I'll tease that I flew out to LA to be a part of a production for something because a producer happened to listen to this show. It was very cool.
Yeah,
it was very tiring.
Yeah.
But it was a long day. I had so much trouble sleeping. Thank God the hotel had a vending machine that had melatonin pills in it.
That's so wild.
Yeah.
Welcome to LA.
Yeah. Been a long week.
And it was a short week as well.
And a short week. You might hear it in my voice. But yeah, thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on social media as well. TikTok, which I can't believe is still here. Instagram, YouTube, etc.
Yeah.
And if you have an idea for an episode, do you want to send in? Kalina has the information for that.
You can email us at podcast@allthisinteresting.com. You can also leave us a voicemail at 929-526-3029. Although people lately have been leaving comments on Spotify.
Comments. Yeah, seems to be the big one now.
Yeah. So I guess you can do that too.
It's convenient. Yeah.
I didn't know you could leave comments on Spotify, but you can, and people have.
Yeah. I think it's a relatively new feature within the past couple months. So it's nice. Hey, it's helpful.
Yeah, I think, and also our next episode, I don't think has been decided yet, unless it's the thing that John emailed yesterday.
Oh, right. Yeah, there was a new submission. Yeah, we haven't decided yet. So we'll It's going to be a mystery to all of us.
A surprise. Fun surprise. Yes.
A little cliffhanger there for you at the end. Stay tuned. Big things coming soon.